One weekly fact about each planet. Mercury is 85% core. Just to put this in perspective for you, Earth is 55% core, which basically means Mercury is like that one dude at the gym who takes his hoodie off and it's just like shredded. Like, bro truly has a sleeper build. Venus was most likely habitable for like 3 billion years. And it only stopped being habitable like 700 million years ago, which means it was habitable most of the time that Earth has been. Which honestly kind of makes me sad because we really could have had like Venus friends, like right there. Earth is the densest planet in the solar system, which makes sense because that's where your big head is. All the dust in Mars's atmosphere make the sunsets blue. Jupiter rotates every 10 hours, which is crazy. If you think about how big Jupiter is, that's insane. Like, that thing is flying. And I also think that we should stop counting shifts and hours and we should just say, yeah, bro, I got like one Jupiter today. Saturn has an absolutely massive storm on its north pole that makes almost a perfect hexagon, which is like kind of creepy, but like so cool at the same time. Contrary to what you might think, Uranus is actually the coldest planet in the solar system, not Neptune. This is basically because when it got absolutely clobbered a few billion years ago and knocked on its side, it lost some of its heat. Some of the storms on Neptune have wind speeds up to 1,600 miles per hour. To put this in perspective, the notoriously largest storm in the whole solar system, the big red spot on Jupiter, 400 miles an hour. 4 times faster than that. See you next week. One weekly fact about each planet. Because Mercury barely has an atmosphere, it can reach up to 800 degrees during the day and negative 290 at night. This is by far the widest temperature range of any planet. Like, bro's like the Lamar Jackson of planets. He's really a dual threat. Venus rotates in retrograde or backwards compared to other planets, and it does it so slowly that its day is longer than its year. No one knows for sure why this happened, but the leading theory is that at some point in its early history, it got absolutely clocked by another Venus-sized planet. Since Earth is the only place known to have life, it creates the rarest materials in the entire solar system. If I offered you your weight in gold or your weight in amber, you're obviously going to take the gold because it's much rarer on Earth. But if you're making a deal with an alien, listen up, this is important advice. You're gonna need this. In a universe where gold forms naturally and amber needs tree resin to form, which is only obviously made on Earth, amber is much more valuable in the grand scheme of the universe. Most of the Mars rovers are dead. Only Curiosity and Perseverance are still working. Kind of makes me sad. They're just like slowly strolling through a graveyard of their dead friends. Jupiter's red spot has been cooking for at least 150 years. Some people think it might have been going on way longer than that. There's observations of a red spot dating back to the 1600s, but they don't know for sure if it was the same storm, which makes me think, what was the biggest storm that has happened on Jupiter, like way before humans like ever came around? Like, what's the biggest, like, what if there's a whole storm that just covered the whole planet? Like, we don't know. We don't know. We never will. That bothers me. Saturn's rings can fit almost perfectly in the distance between the Earth and the Moon, which is kind of disturbing because you can also fit every single planet in that distance side by side. Kind of makes you realize how much of a commitment the moon landing was. Like, those dudes were really out there. Like, they were gone. Uranus's moon Miranda has a cliff that's so high that if you fell off it, you'd be falling at 90 miles an hour for 10 minutes straight. Neptune is so far away that it was discovered with mathematical calculations. Basically, sometime in the mid-1800s, these two white dudes below me both did some calculations and figured out that Uranus's orbit didn't quite make sense unless something was tugging on it. And as soon as they did the math and figured out roughly where this object would be, there was a race to see who could find it with a telescope first, and it's still debated who won that. See you next week. All right, this week we're going to talk about the first spacecraft to visit every planet. Are y'all ready? Okay, everybody find a seat. All right, the first spacecraft to visit Mercury was called Mariner 10. It made a bunch of huge discoveries. It mapped like 40% of Mercury's surface. It discovered that Mercury was 85% core. It was the first spacecraft to ever get a gravity assist from another planet. But my favorite thing about this spacecraft is that it sucked. I'm talking like genuinely one of the worst spacecraft ever made. When it was first launched, not even a month into the mission, it just dropped into backup power for no reason and wouldn't go back. One of its computers would just randomly restart all the time on its own, resetting its clocks, which was an absolute nightmare. But my favorite way that it would mess up was that it was supposed to follow the star Canopus to navigate itself to Mercury, and instead of doing that, it would just randomly follow paint chips that were coming off the spacecraft. Like, bro really had no idea where he was going. He was just along for the ride. Next up, we got Mariner 2, which was the first spacecraft to ever visit our girl Venus. This was actually the first US mission to another planet, and it was the closest anybody had ever gotten to another planet up until this point. But by far the best discovery to come out of this mission is that before this point, a lot of people thought that Venus was habitable, like so habitable we could live there. But Mariner 2 was like, nah, it's just hell. All right, next up we got Mariner 4, which was the first spacecraft to visit Mars. Kind of similarly to Mariner 2 with Venus, a lot of people thought that Mars was habitable up until this point. As a matter of fact, a lot of people were afraid of Martian invasion. But lo and behold, Mariner 4 rolls up and discovers that Mars is a cratered landscape with no magnetic field, no water, and barely any atmosphere, and it's also freezing. All right, next up we got Pioneer 10, which was the first to visit Jupiter, and Pioneer 11, which was the first to visit Saturn. This may be kind of a controversial opinion, and like, please don't tag Neil deGrasse Tyson or Hank Green because I don't want them to hear me say this, but like, as far as what they did for Jupiter and Saturn, kind of mid, kind of just gathered a bunch of basic data. Like Pioneer 10 got a close-up view of the red spot, which is cool. They measured magnetic fields, compositions, that kind of thing. Pioneer 11 discovered a ring, which is cool, but basically like the best parts about them happened when they weren't at these planets. Kind of befitting with their name, the biggest deal about the Pioneer spacecraft was that they're the first to do a lot of things. They're the first to travel past Mars, through the asteroid belt, the first to visit those respective planets, and the first spacecraft to ever be on its trajectory to leave the solar system. And they were the first spacecraft to carry the golden records, which if you don't know about them, like please look them up. I could do a full 30 minutes just about how cool these things are, but basically they have a bunch of information on them just in case aliens find them, that they could figure out where Earth is and who we are and all that crap. All right, last but not least, we have the greatest spacecraft of all time. Don't at me. It's Voyager 2, the GOAT. This guy did basically everything that Pioneer 10 and 11 and Voyager 1 did, but better. It got thousands of close-up pictures of Jupiter and Saturn and their moons and their rings. That was all it was supposed to do. Just like Pioneer 10 and 11 and just like Voyager 1, it was just supposed to study two of the biggest planets and then just dip out of the solar system. Instead, when it was done with its original mission, astronomers kind of figured out, hey, Uranus and Neptune are kind of in a good place right now. Like, we could just send it there and see what we can do. Lo and behold, 9 years after it left Saturn, because that's how far away the outer planets are, it shows up at Uranus, the first spacecraft to ever do so. And in not even 6 hours of time to study the planet, it discovered that Uranus was on its side, which is like the most iconic Uranus fact. It's discovered 10 new moons and 2 new rings. But then, as if all of this wasn't enough already, Voyager 2 is like, nah, I got one more in me. It takes another 3.5-year trip to Neptune. While it was there, it discovered its great dark spot, its high wind speeds, 6 new moons. It took the best pictures we'd ever had of it up until this point, and it discovered that Triton, its biggest moon, was geologically active. These 2 pictures of Uranus and Neptune that you will always see when you Google these planets were taken by Voyager 2. No other spacecraft has been there before or since. Still to this day, when I do these weekly Planet Facts videos, it's so hard for me to find anything about these planets that Voyager 2 didn't discover. See you next week. In about 5 billion years, the sun is going to expand and beat the piss out of the solar system. Here's what will happen on every planet. Starting off pretty simply, Venus and Mercury, dead, deleted, gone. As for us and our homeboy, the moon, it's not looking good. Best we can hope for is like a Mercury situation. Humans or whatever intelligent species might follow us within that time will have left a long time ago. But one of my favorite theories that I found while researching this is that some scientists think we might have moved the planet. Our boy Mars, while he should escape getting gobbled up like the rest of us, will have his atmosphere blown off. It's heavily debated what will happen to Jupiter and Saturn. They're either going to swell up by gobbling up a lot of that matter the sun throws off, or they're going to see their atmospheres greatly reduced, or both. They're both going to look very different, but Saturn especially is going to be completely unrecognizable. Its rings are only supposed to last a couple 100 million more years, so they have been long gone by this point, but in the off chance it gets more rings, they're basically going to get vaporized, so they'll be gone again. So no like super sick fiery version of Saturn. Its rings are mostly made of ice, and there's not going to be a lot of that to go around. Jupiter could actually see itself become a hot Jupiter, which is basically like a Jupiter-like planet that's really close to its star. These are actually the most easy to detect exoplanet. We've documented dozens of them, but maybe if we've survived all this and we're still in the solar system, like we'll just call them Jupiters at that point. But by far the most interesting thing that will be happening in the Jupiter and Saturnian systems is that that's going to be the new habitable zone, which means a good amount of their moons that have ice and water on them at this point might be habitable. Like we might be living there. As for our ice giant friends, one of my favorite theories is they might just get ejected from the solar system. If that doesn't happen, at the very least, they're going to be twice as far away from the sun as they are now, which could actually work out in the ice giant's favor because they might escape a lot of that deadly solar radiation. But by far the sickest thing that'll happen out there is that Neptune's moon Triton might be the best real estate in the entire solar system, which means that future humans or whatever follows us might be going to sleep with views like this every night. See you next week. One weekly fact about each planet. Mercury is only 5% the mass of the Earth. It's literally smaller than 2 of the biggest moons in the solar system. By far the smallest planet. I know you're thinking about Pluto right now. Leave him out of this. Everybody knows that Venus is hot enough to cook you like a Thanksgiving turkey, but what is not talked about nearly enough is the fact that it has about the same amount of pressure as you would find 3,000 feet deep in the ocean. Which means that if you stepped out of a spacecraft on Venus while you were being cooked like aforementioned turkey, your lungs would be doing this. Mars rovers top out at 0.1 miles per hour. Like I understand that there are billions of dollars to make and send to Mars, and it's all very complicated, and like they have so much to learn. Like I'm not taking anything away from them, but like bro, hurry up. Also, bonus non-planet fact, while I was looking this up, I found out that's the average speed of a sloth when threatened. Jupiter basically has its own asteroid belt. These type of asteroids are called Trojan asteroids, and there might be 1 million of them. Basically, he pushes half of them in front of him and the other half follow behind, but I think it's kind of cute, honestly, because he's like, you know, he's like a mama duck, and these are like all his babies. Saturn's rings are not going to last forever. They could disappear any day now. No, I'm just kidding, bro. We got like 300 million years. Uranus's biggest moon, Titania, has a canyon that's 3 times deeper than the Grand Canyon. Imagine the view, bro. Imagine the view. Neptune has completed 1 orbit since it was discovered in 1846. It'll be 2174 before it does it again. See you next week. One weekly fact about each planet. There's a crater on Mercury that's bigger than Texas, but that's not even my favorite thing about this crater. The asteroid that caused this crater hit Mercury so hard that the exact opposite side of the planet is full of hills. Basically, what I'm trying to tell you is that Mercury got rocked so hard that he dookied himself. Negating the fact that Venus is the closest thing we know of to like actual real life hell. If an alien lived on Venus, they would have no idea that stars exist because the atmosphere is so thick that you can't even see through it. Like this is roughly what Venus looks like during the daytime. Can you find the sun? Took you a second, didn't it? Compared to other potentially habitable Earth-like planets that we found, Earth is actually really tiny. Super Earth planets like these are actually the most common type of exoplanet found, and some of them are 10 times bigger than the Earth. It's even been argued that planets like this might be more suitable for life, so maybe we're all just mad because we inherited little man syndrome from the Earth. About once every 5 years, Mars gets dust storms that are so big that they cover the entire planet and make it completely unrecognizable. Just for a little bit of nightmare fuel, this is what that thing would look like coming at you. In 1994, a comet called Shoemaker-Levy 9 tried to give Jupiter the work, and Jupiter ripped it into more than 20 pieces and slowly devoured it over the course of 2 years. Bonus fact, this is also the first time that our species ever saw a comet collide with a planet and documented it, and our boy put on a show. Good work, Jupiter. Saturn's rings are about 4 to 6 Earths wide, depending on which rings you count, but they're only about 30 feet tall on average, which if you don't know is about the height of a telephone pole. This fact really hurt my feelings. I don't know why, but I don't like that. That's too small. During its summer and winter seasons, Uranus's poles are almost perfectly aligned with the sun so that the other side faces 21 years of darkness at a time. One of the best ways to put in perspective just how insanely far away Neptune is, take a spoon, right? Just a normal spoon. Imagine Earth is on one end and the sun is on the other end. That's about the distance from the Earth to the sun in this model, right? Put that spoon on the ground and walk 10 feet away. That's where Neptune is. See you next week. One weekly fact about each planet. Mercury is catapulting through the solar system at 29 miles per second. Like if orbiting the sun was the Kentucky Derby, Mercury is secretary and we are all eating his dust. But if it went any slower, the sun would devour it, so that would motivate me too. Venus's atmosphere is so thick that it's 2.5 times brighter than the Earth. The combination of this and its proximity to Earth make it the second brightest object in the night sky, but she hasn't been around for a while. I miss you, Venus. Come back. She's not answering my call. A day on Earth gets an hour longer every 200 million years, meaning when the Earth looked something like this and there was big scary lizards walking around, a day was only 23 hours long. Then another 200 million years when the human race is definitely taking a big sleep and the planet can finally recover from our stupidity, 25 hours. Despite the fact that Mars is half the diameter of the Earth, it's only a tenth the mass, meaning a Martian would be much more comfortable in Mercury's gravity than Earth. Y'all know the Great Red Spot on Jupiter? Yeah, that thing could gobble up the entire planet like a 4x4 in Wendy's. Y'all know Saturn's rings, aka the jewel of the solar system? Yeah, it got those by ripping apart one of its moons and blending what was left into jewelry. In 2006, astronomers found a hole in Uranus, and that's all I'm gonna say about that. Neptune is so unfathomably far away that the sun is basically just the brightest star in the sky. Dang, I just realized I made this video a little bit too short and it's gotta be over a minute for me to get paid, so y'all just sit with me for like 3 more seconds. Alright, see you next week. One weekly fact about each planet. Mercury's day is twice as long as its year, which means if you were walking at a steady pace on Mercury, you could keep the sun at the same place in the sky and be walking in twilight forever. The surface of Venus is hot enough to cook a pizza in 7 seconds, but it wouldn't taste very good because the atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide and you'd be cooking along with it. And also, please don't make fun of my hat. I know it's dirty. My dog stepped on it and I don't want to wear the orange one in every single video. The magnetic poles on Earth flip every 200 to 300,000 years, and they haven't done it in almost 800,000 years, which means they could start flipping at any time. Billions of years ago when Mars stopped being habitable, so much ice melted at one time that it created the tallest waterfall in the entire solar system. Just to put it in perspective for you, this thing is 70 times taller than Niagara Falls. Y'all remember that asteroid that hit the planet so hard it wiped out all the dinosaurs? Yeah, Jupiter did that. Speaking of dinosaurs, Saturn's rings are only a couple 100 million years old, which means if you went back in time to see dinosaurs and you had a telescope, this is what it would look like in the sky. Speaking of rings, Uranus has some pretty sick ones too, but nobody ever wants to talk about them. Why is that? Neptune's biggest moon, Triton, is one of the only known moons to orbit in retrograde or backwards around a planet, which makes astronomers think that it was probably a dwarf planet that was flying by and got snatched up, which I feel like is kind of Neptune's way of reminding Pluto who the real furthest planet from the sun is. Like Neptune's like, oh, you thought you were a planet? I have one of your best friends in my backyard. See you next week. One weekly fact about each planet. Mercury sits so close to the sun that their magnetic fields basically try to fight each other and form magnetic tornadoes on Mercury's surface. It's been believed for some time now that Venus was potentially habitable for billions of years. Well, a recent study from Cambridge said that it probably never was. It's probably always been hell. It's always been too hot for life, and the water has almost always been vapor. So great. Thanks, Cambridge. Really appreciate that. Despite what a lot of people believe, Earth isn't actually perfectly spherical. It's actually kind of thick around the middle, which Mars gets dust devils that are up to 10 times bigger than the ones on Earth. But since its atmosphere is like really thin, they're like not super powerful, but we can just pretend they are. Jupiter is so big that the center of mass between Jupiter and the sun lies outside of the sun's surface. Insane. That's a flex, bro. After studying and orbiting Saturn for 13 years, the Cassini spacecraft started to run out of fuel, and astronomers got really worried that it was going to accidentally hit one of the moons and populate it with Earth germs. So they decided, let's just crash it into Saturn, and that's what they did. Uranus is the only gas giant that has less surface gravity than Earth, meaning if you weighed 100 pounds on Earth, you would weigh 89 pounds on Uranus. Now, before you come from me saying, but oh, Uranus is a gas giant, it doesn't have a surface. In this example, it's where the upper and the lower cloud layers meet. Okay, leave me alone. Last but not least, maybe my least favorite space fact of all time, Neptune isn't that blue. Like it's not like the dark, like navy blue. Like it looks like Uranus, bro. Like the pictures from the 80s were enhanced and it's not that blue. This hurts me, man. I'm gonna ignore this. Y'all ignore this with me. This didn't happen. See you next week and Merry Christmas. One week nosy fact about each planet. For about half a century, it was widely believed that there was another planet between Mercury and the Sun, and they named it Vulcan. This is basically because Newtonian physics, which was like the leading theory at the time, didn't fully explain Mercury's orbit, so they thought there must have been another planet kind of tugging on it. Astronomers struggled for years to actually try to find this planet and were unsuccessful, and then eventually basically Einstein came along with relativity and was like, there's no need for this. The orbit makes sense. Kind of a shame though, because like Vulcan is like the sickest planet name ever. Venus's surface is so hostile that the longest the lander has ever lasted is 127 minutes. It was done by this legend Veneer 13 in 1982, and it was actually only supposed to last like 30 minutes, so bro did a good job, honestly. Good for you. Rest in peace, bro. We miss you. A little over 2 billion years ago, so much cyanobacteria populated the Earth at one point that it permanently changed the atmosphere. It swapped out so much carbon dioxide for oxygen that it literally created the first mass extinction event on Earth. But then, after that, it paved the way for complex life. So not only is it the reason that we breathe oxygen today, we literally would not exist if this didn't happen. The biggest volcano in the solar system, Olympus Mons on Mars, is so big that if you stood at its peak, the edge of the volcano would literally be beyond the horizon. Jupiter and Saturn have so many moons that not only are some of them waiting to be confirmed to exist, dozens of the ones that have been found don't even have names. Uranus has more methane than any other planet, and that's all I'm going to say about that. If I asked you what the most iconic feature of Neptune is, you'd probably say the Great Dark Spot. Well, I learned recently it's gone. It's been confirmed gone since 1994. See you next week.